Great. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Margot Birbeck. I head up the inQuba Australia team based in Sydney. I've been working with inQuba for about 8 years now, and I'm excited to invite you to join us this afternoon to hear about customer journey management. Today, I'm joined by Trent Rossini, who is the inQuba COO, and he has decades of experience in leading large health insurers, and Desan Pillay, who's inQuba CXO and has extensive experience as a banking executive. Just a little bit of housekeeping. On the webinar on the right-hand side, you'll be able to see the section that says questions. Please do post questions throughout the session, and then at the end, we will answer them for you. So this webinar is part of a series of events around our launch of Journey Management, which is really a ground breakthrough thinking and approach to customer experience. We've launched it and we're getting some exceptional feedback from the market in Australia and globally. And we're also in the process of rolling out Journey Management to a number of large financial services organizations. And I'm looking forward to hearing from Trent a bit later in the webinar what some of this looks like. So what is Journey Management? Journey management is the science of winning and keeping customers. This webinar really aims at explaining the what and the how, so stay tuned for the next hour as we share the thinking and techniques that you can then take back into your organizations. We really see journey management as the next phase of customer experience, and what I mean is that by this, I mean I've worked with many financial services organizations, and what I've seen is that organizations have invested heavily in customer experience initiatives, both in dollar spend and in effort. And these initiatives include things like NPS, voice of the customer, employee engagement programs. And the programs that are managed well are getting great results. Every day we are seeing improvements across our client programs. And one example of this would be, I was with a client in Melbourne last week, and they have hit a record high NPS score of 75, which is phenomenal. And there are many examples, and you'll see in your organization as well, where specific operational teams or areas are getting stellar results. But the problem, however, is that it is extremely difficult to translate these improvements into predictable business value. We see that NPS is going up, or the customer experience is improving, or say our staff are more engaged, but we really struggle to tie this back to business performance. And the thing that is missing is the business case for customer experience. But why? So the practice of customer experience is not new. People were talking about this way back in the 80s, where it was defined as the customer's perception of all the interactions they have with a business over time. And this definition certainly holds true still today. However, we can't answer the question of why people stay, why they leave, or why they have the experiences they do. And the challenge is that until today, we haven't really had the scientific approach to understand the relationship between the customer's real journey and retention and acquisition. Specifically, we haven't had the tools to visualize real customer journeys as they happen. And even the most sophisticated journey maps don't show us the obstacles and drop-offs. And they definitely don't show us this in real time. Tools like journey analytics use data to bring journey maps to life and give us a way to be able to manage customers back onto the paths we want them to be on. And this is especially important for financial services, where we have so many different customers having different interactions across products and service lines every second. And it's very, very difficult to be able to visualize and manage those experiences over time. So journey management is what allows us to master our customer experiences and also to be able to do this at scale. And with that, I would like to hand over to Trent Rossini. I hope you enjoyed the webinar.
Thank you, Margot, for the introduction. Do appreciate the time. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for attending our webinar this afternoon. With an introduction like decades of experience, it goes without saying that I've certainly been in this industry for quite some time. And it's been interesting to see the transition and how things are evolving in this particular environment. So what I'm going to be sharing with you today is really our view on customer experience management within the environment. And we hope that some of those insights can be useful for you. So I think today's discussion is really focused on the financial services environment. And as we interact with different executives across different markets, we're getting some common themes coming up. Those are centered around themes like, what is the long-term value or embedded value associated with customers? What about the rising cost of acquisition, obviously, as competitors come into the space? How in the long term do you make sure that you actually increase the switching costs for your customers? Because what you want to do is you want to compensate and reduce lapses. And then there's this inevitable growing distance between the business and the end client, and obviously you want to narrow that. And last, but certainly not least, is the massive channel adoption and the shift to digital we see every day with the likes of social media channels, whether it's Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter, which are forming part and parcel of people's lives. Now, each of those different factors has a big impact, and they really have an impact on three areas, and these three areas really distill most of business. So the first of those is acquisition, the second is retention, and the third is cross-sell. And we think, and certainly what we're hearing from our client base, is that these are the core issues that sit at the center of focus for executives as they're trying to manage their businesses on a day-to-day basis. So obviously you need an approach, you need a mechanism to be able to deal with the situation. And that's really what I want to share with you today. And I want to talk a little bit about how we look at this world. So at the center of responding to these particular challenges, obviously you need an operating model. And that operating model defines how a business should work. And it's very specific to your business. Obviously, if you're a short-term insurer, your dynamics are quite different, for instance, to being a bank. But regardless of the kind of business that you are, ultimately what you're going to need is you need customer measurements and insight. And that's something that we've been doing for quite some time. But very importantly, you need actioning systems. You need a mechanism to take the insights and action what you see in order to improve the operating model and make sure that you meet those customer requirements. So moving on to the top left is, if we think about customers and we think about customers trying to navigate the world, and let's think about a customer, for argument's sake, looking for a home loan. At the end of the day, they want a home loan because they have a particular desire, and that desire is to obviously provide a home for their family. And as a bank, what you're looking to do is you're looking to satisfy that particular need, and if you do that well and you do that effectively, ultimately you get to generate revenue. But it's important to understand that customers are human beings that obviously are filled with emotion, and if, for argument's sake, you're going through the process of taking out a new home loan, it's quite important to understand the emotional context of the customer. And that really talks about empathizing with the customer, understanding where the customer is coming from. And that really leads us to this whole notion of being empathetic to the customer and understanding the customer across the journey. The next point at the top right is really to understand that the customer's experience is not centered around, for instance, one interaction with the call center, or alternatively another interaction with the branch. It is, in fact, the sum of the parts. And it's about making sure that the customer has a great journey from the start to the finish. So we start off by understanding that customers have goals and you need to satisfy them, that you have to have an emotional and empathetic understanding of the customer, and that the end-to-end journey has to be one that makes sense. That then takes us into the domain of actually doing something with the insights. And really, it's about putting actioning systems in place to make sure that the right interventions are there across the entire journey, and making sure that you're actually helping those customers achieve their goal. And then on the bottom left, if you're going to be working in this world, and this world, this connected world in which we operate on a daily basis, what you're going to have to do as a CX or a customer engagement professional is that you're going to have to get a full view of the customer. And the only way you can get a full view of the customer is by integrating lots of diverse data into a single platform that allows you to get this end-to-end journey. And then lastly, on the bottom right, what we've seen is that if you're going to do this at scale and you're going to service many thousands of customers, that you have to make use of all the developments in machine learning to make sure that the right action happens at the right point in time. So with that context in place, let's take a particular scenario. And today we're going to be talking about a customer going through a journey of engaging with an insurer. The customer's name is Charlotte, and the organization that Charlotte is interacting with is Transatlantic. And we'll actually show you a little bit further on in the webinar today. We'll show you Charlotte's experience in interacting with this organization as she gets serviced and provides her input and receives services from Transatlantic Insurance. So where does it all start? It all starts with a customer wanting to take out a policy. And it might turn out that this particular customer gets off track, and the next thing is an organization like Transatlantic, if it has the right solution in place, will actually identify the customers off track and will engage with Charlotte and say, hang on, Charlotte, we see that you might need a little bit of help with your policy. Can we give you a quick call? Obviously, Charlotte would be delighted. She'd hopefully say, yes, please. You'd interact with her, and you'd direct that into the organization and assign that, in this case, to Martha, and Martha would get hold of Charlotte and actually resolve the issue. And it's important, obviously, that you have the right mechanism in place to actually identify that Charlotte needs help. So Charlotte has now hopefully onboarded, had a really good experience, and we're progressing on her customer journey. And the next thing is that Charlotte would like to submit a claim. So Charlotte sets off on the journey of trying to submit a claim, and as is often the case, if she's not getting any service, what does she do? She obviously heads towards social media, in this case Twitter, and says, wow, Transatlantic, I'm a little frustrated by the slow process of the claim. And again, if Transatlantic is a progressive organization, ideally they're listening to the Twitter channel, and they acknowledge the fact that Charlotte is having a bad experience by saying, hi, Charlotte, thanks for bringing this to our attention. And again, what they do is they take Charlotte's case, they assign it to an individual within the organization to make sure that the issue is in fact resolved. So hopefully Charlotte goes through a good experience and gets her claim settled. And then as an organization, what you want to do is you want to engage with Charlotte and actually ask Charlotte, well, how was the experience? And obviously, if you've done a great job, hopefully she'll give you great feedback. And you know that Charlotte is now positively disposed towards the brand. So you have a potential customer who's been through an experience with this organization. She likes the brand. She's actually stated that she's going to recommend it to family and friends. And this really is an ideal opportunity to actually progress and offer Charlotte a new product. So she might have started off by taking out an insurance policy on a new Volkswagen, and now what we're going to do is we're going to give her an addition of a dent and scratch cover, and that's well positioned. You understand where Charlotte's coming from. Hopefully she'll take that up quite quickly, and that will allow you to actually generate additional revenue by understanding the context of what's happening in Charlotte's lives. Now, while all of this is going on, what you want to be doing is you want to be building up a profile of Charlotte and understanding how Charlotte is feeling during this whole experience, and using that information to actually get a completely empathetic, ideally profiled view of Charlotte as she's interacted across the different channels. Now, the way the inQuba solution works is that we understand that organizations have a number of line of business systems. And if you're a bank or if you're an insurer, obviously you've got a large number of those line of business systems. And you have different applications that you're using to actually service the customers. And the whole idea of Journey Analytics is an overlay solution that works in conjunction with those more traditional line of business systems to pull in additional insights and get a sense of exactly what the journey is, and then to direct customers along those journeys dependent on their need in order to make sure that they're reaching their goals. And then as a financial institution, if you help your customers meet their goals, ultimately what you're going to do is you're going to generate revenue, which is good for your own business. So just very briefly, a little bit about inQuba. We're an organization that was established in 2010. Our three main areas of operation are obviously Australia and New Zealand. We also have a strong presence in the USA and very active in the South African market. We cover a large number of industries, starting off with retail. Companies like Goodyear are making use of the inQuba solution across the Australian environment. Onto financial services, working with a number of organizations in that environment. Notably, Suncorp is making use, and we've partnered with Suncorp over the last 4 or 5 years and have a very productive relationship with them. Moving on to the telco space, and then a fair amount of activity in the hospitality and lifestyle area. We are fortunate in that we have been recognized by the likes of Forrester, both in terms of the work that we're doing in the voice of the customer space, and then certainly in terms of the work that we're doing around journey analytics, and we continue to grow and invest in that particular space, and that is the subject of a lot of today's webinar. Importantly, the work that we've done has resulted in some very positive outcome for clients. We've got an example over here, a short-term insurer, MyWay, and we've done some work with them where we've managed to retain over 57% of customers that are at risk. And that's really by identifying customers that were contemplating leaving and interacting with the customer in order to retain that customer and stop them from leaving the organization. Another organization, Vitality Life, based out of the United Kingdom. We've seen over a period of time, by using the different techniques that we have available, that we've managed to increase the satisfaction amongst the top advisors. And this obviously has had a positive impact in terms of the long-term revenue. So we realize that any organization we work with is not interested in what we offer either as a solution or as a technology, but rather they're looking for the outcomes that Vitality Life and MyWay have achieved. What I would like to do is really move on to talking about the inQuba approach to doing journey management. And at the core of what we do really sits this whole notion of a customer journey. And any project that we do starts off by putting together a representation of what that customer journey is. That's done directly within the inQuba platform. And we actually model the customer journey. Just taking a small subset of a customer journey. Here we're looking at, for instance, a claim. We see a claim is made up of a claims inquiry, an assessment, providing additional documentation, and claims payment. And what we do is we actually link the transactional systems of the organization, as well as the feedback we get from customers, as well as the qualitative feedback we get from unstructured text, such as Twitter. We actually link that to the customer journey to get an end-to-end view. And what that allows us to do is to get a strong sense of exactly what the customer journey is. Now, where this becomes very useful is, let's think about a customer going through the process of taking out a policy. So in this particular case, we're interacting with the application. It started off with the agent in terms of requesting the application, then acceptance of the quote, and providing documentation. And we can actually model that within the inQuba platform. And then we can start to understand exactly what different customers are doing at different parts. So in this particular illustrated example, we could have 75% of customers actually activating, and we know that's going to happen, and we use that in our predictive models. We also know that 15% won't progress and potentially need assistance, and we can intervene with it. And potentially 10% over a period of time, we actually learn that those customers are at risk, and we can actually put interventions in place to make sure that we don't lose them across the customer journey. What we can also do is we can identify interactions across the customer journey. We spoke a little bit earlier about the fact that potentially customers are getting off track. We can see that customers are either stuck or not progressing, and we can use that as a mechanism to actually track those scenarios and make sure that we service the customers, in this case, interacting with Charlotte. And we do that through the inQuba case management, which is an integrated part of the inQuba solution. And it means that we can take a case, like for instance, a tweet, direct it into the organization, assign it, and then manage that whole process from an end-to-end point of view to ensure that no customer is left by themselves as they're trying to navigate the organization. And then in the more traditional sense of voice of the customer, we can actually get feedback from customers. So at key points, we can get feedback. We can author those surveys directly within the platform and link them to the journey. And then we can use the insights that we have to get a view of the customer journey. What we're seeing over here on the bottom right is a view of our CX manager, which allows us to see a data represented customer journey and allows us to assess whether we're doing a great job from an end-to-end point of view. We also have full integration from a social media point of view. So the inQuba platform provides the ability to monitor social media and then to actually respond directly within one integrated solution. And then obviously all of the insights that we collect through the anchoring to the customer experience model is used to actually understand the end-to-end journey, and it allows us to get a sense of where people are at and to react when obviously they're expressing to the world that they're not happy with a particular brand. And then lastly, what we can do is we can use the opportunity and the profile of the customer as we understand them better to actually put highly personalized communications together and then monitor the effectiveness of those communications, continuously building up a profile of the customer as they navigate the environment. And that all feeds into the single customer view. That single customer view is then accessible across the entire platform and can be used to personalize those communications and understand the customer in order to better service them. Across the entire platform are some very in-depth analytics. So we can understand right from an executive level, from a dashboard level, through an operational level, right through to a very deep analytical level, exactly the experience that the customer is going through. Now, just imagine for a second that you as an organization had the capability across millions of clients to see who's on journeys, who's off journey, who's cheering for you. Wouldn't that be a game changer? Well, to a large extent, that's why inQuba was set up. That's why we're here. We're there to help our corporate customers achieve exactly that particular objective. And our solution is made up by a number of components. And I've spoken about each of those components during the course of what I've just run through. So we have journey analytics that can understand the end-to-end journey as customers navigating an organization. We have inQuba CX that allows us to manage the customer experience. We have case management for escalations. If there are any issues at any point within the customer journey, can be directed and managed through inQuba case management. We've got the engagement marketing. We have social media. We've got single view. And then integrated to the entire platform, we have the text analytics within the solution. So what I want to finish off with is I want to really finish off with a case study, and specifically a case study in the credit card space. Now think of a customer going through a process of applying for a credit card, accepting the quote, receiving the card, and then ultimately activating. And starting off on the left-hand side, when they apply for the credit card, potentially the application could be incomplete. There could be a quote that's pending. It could be a quote that potentially is declined. Moving on, they then have that application fulfilled, but there might be documents outstanding and you want to assess what the sales experience is. Then you have to arrange for the card delivery, and potentially after the card has been delivered, there might not be any spend. And similarly, you want to understand the delivery experience. But the objective and the goal is ultimately to make sure that the customer gets their payment instrument, in this case a credit card, and spends money. So when looking at this particular challenge, what we can do is we can use the inQuba approach to gain insights at different points within the end-to-end customer journey. And we can use those insights to actually understand where things are going right and where they're going wrong. And from that, we can actually identify stall points from an end-to-end point of view as to where the issues are across the whole continuum. So that represents really a starting point of gaining understanding, gaining deep insights in terms of what's happening. But that really isn't enough, because regardless of what you learn, unless you're bringing about actions to actually bring about a change, you're not going to see an improvement. And that really leads us to the next capabilities or set of capabilities that we have. And it starts off by using various data sets, data from the inQuba platform itself in terms of voice of customer data, transactional data, and potentially credit bureau data, and feeding those into a machine learning platform, which in turn then tells the platform exactly what communication to send at different points within the customer journey. So the result is that we can send out highly personalized communications that are nudging customers along, showing them the benefits of the credit card, showing them exactly how, for instance, to activate the card, getting feedback in terms of whether the courier that's delivering the card is doing a good job. And that pushes the customer forward and allows them to achieve their goal, and allows the corporate clients that we're working with to truly satisfy the end customer. So hopefully that gives you a good sense of how inQuba approaches the challenge of customer journey management, how we drive towards the cross-sell, retaining customers, and the upsell of existing customers. Right, Desan, are you ready to go?
Thank you, Trent. Thanks for the good introduction as well, and sort of the theoretical knowledge of journey management. Good afternoon, all in Australia. So my name is Desan Pillay. I'm the Chief Experience Officer for inQuba. So what I'll be talking to you about this afternoon is very much around customer journey management, but the interesting point around how do we monetize these journeys, and how do we actually create revenue for us in the financial services industry. So just on my experience, I've been a financial services executive for many years. I've consulted to some of the bigger banks and insurance companies globally. And what I've seen is the real commonalities in financial services, that a big topic of business cases come up. And on business cases is we run around for months in, months out, kind of doing a business case around CX initiatives. But what banks always struggle to is actually measure the benefits that come out of some of the CX initiatives. And I think, as Margot mentioned earlier, inQuba's breakthrough is very much around how can we now measure the benefits from all the CX initiatives through journey management. And that's what I'll talk to you about this afternoon. Okay, so just on the language of journey, I think we hear a lot of jargon in financial services companies, and some of these jargons are words like DITLOC, which is the day in the life of a customer. And we always in our meetings speak about client needs, our clients' wants, behaviors, value, and ultimately what does the client actually do on his day-to-day experience. So let me tell you how inQuba can actually answer all these questions for you in your day-to-day lives as executives in banks and insurers. So what really intrigued me about inQuba's platforms and the power in the software is that inQuba really simplifies some of the big words of big data and artificial intelligence and machine learning. And really, in order to do customer journey management, there's kind of only 3 simple data points that's needed. And these data points are the transaction name, the time of that transaction, and the actual person or a client identifier that's required to build a customer journey management. So just to take you through an example, and I know in Australia, what's quite popular on a Saturday afternoon is guys standing around a barbecue and kind of chatting about the previous week or the previous 2 weeks and some of the challenges that they had. So take an example. We have 3 guys, Bob, John, and Mark, sitting around a barbecue, and they were all speaking around the time it has taken that they on a home loan application. So they've all now in a space where they've applied for a home loan. They've gone through bond originators at different banks, and each of them are actually trying to get the bond approved, which is that specific goal. And what we see is that with Bob, John, and Mark, each of them has traversed very different journeys, taking very different times to get their bonds approved. And that is ideally what's happening in the real world. Is there's no journey that's very similar per customer. And what inQuba does is we're able to track that in terms of the customer's different steps taken to get to that goal. So what is customer journey management? And using those 3 data points of what we see is that with transaction name that you see in this block and with the person, and when you really add time on it, what you see is that you are able to identify a customer's journey to reach that specific goal. So what I'm trying to say here is when you put in transaction name and person and you overlay this with time, you're actually able to see the different paths that each Bob, John, and Mark has taken over this time to get to that home loan application being approved. However, when you look at customer experience management and the classical customer experience management, without time and person, all you see is just a cluster of experiences. So there's not much you could do kind of seeing this picture from an executive perspective. So what is really the power of journeys? So in a typical customer experience management program, we send out surveys, and the response rates on these surveys is probably between 10 to 15% on all the customers that we send these surveys out to. The power of journey management is that you now get to speak to 100% of the customers, and you get an idea of what these customers are saying along these different journeys. You are able to see the steps that the customer takes to get to that goal of his home loan being approved, for example. You are able to visualize the customer's path in getting to that goal. You are able to see dead ends, whereas in customer experience management, we show you you're able to just see the loops. You actually have the ability on inQuba's platform to now nudge a customer by engaging with them and getting them back on track to that ideal journey to get to their goal as quick as possible. And imagine doing all of this in real time. And that's the real power of inQuba's journey management. So as I said, coming from the banking environment and insurance environment, we speak a lot about acquisition, retention, and cross-sell. And that's ultimately what we measured as executives. And what we struggle with is we would like to speak to a specific customer about a specific offering at a point in time. And there's a real powerful software out there in inQuba Journey Management that helps you do this. So getting that target marketing campaign is really critical to get to understanding acquisition, retention, and cross-sell strategies. And through inQuba's platform, and Trent will take you through this demo just after me, is we are able to see the client's behaviors and characteristics and kind of micro segment them and build their customer personas to get the target marketing right. Through our platforms, we are actually able to see the customer channels that they would like to interact with us on. And we're actually starting to see a lot of these customer feedback that really helps us understand and shape the future of this customer in terms of how we drive acquisition, retention, and cross-sell. So I think sitting there, guys, trying to understand everything that we're speaking about so far, what would I like you to leave this conversation or this webinar with is where do you start in your bank and where do you start in your insurance company? And what we've done is just put out a few examples of what some of the work we're doing with some of the financial services companies. So in the retail and commercial banking environment, we speak about account opening and new cards collections. So let's look at the account opening process and let's try to understand that journey a bit more using inQuba's platforms. An example that Trent mentioned was around card. The card onboarding process is quite a long journey, multiple touch points. It's very nice to understand how can we use this to actually get acquisition and cross-sell through the organization. From an insurance perspective, something that we see in the environment is getting a policy onboarded takes a long time, whether it's done through a broker or whether it's done through any of the digital channels. There's different ways that we could measure this and understand that journey. The claims process is something that's a very redundant task in insurers, and that's a journey that's quite a big journey that we would like to work with you to understand that a bit better. And then there's a few more examples that I put up here in terms of telecoms and media, regards to churn management, with regards to new activation. So ideally, guys, I think this is a place that we would like to start with you in terms of understanding your journeys. That's a big challenge in an organization, and working on these journeys to engage with your clients and ultimately building that ideal business case for your organization. So how can inQuba assist you in this? And we speak about journeys being effectively monetized. When you go and speak to the group technology or IT departments, there's always long-term projects, which is usually 2 or 3 years to get software included into your business. With inQuba, there's no system integration that's required. Everything's done via ETLs. We do understand that data is a currency to journey, and it can be tricky when we speak about data. Hence, inQuba has developed a powerful data wizard tool that actually simplifies data to give you exactly what you want as a client. We are able to map and digitize journeys across multiple journeys at once. And we do this through a team of data experts and data scientists and BI experts as well. And ultimately, inQuba Journey Analytics, we just pioneered this globally. So that's something we're really proud of. So I'm hoping that this really caught your attention and have given you understanding of exactly how we monetize journeys in your organizations. It's something that you could take back to your teams. And ideally, what I would like from this is let us help you and optimize and monetize your business. And please speak to Margot. She's around the corner from you. And I'm sure Margot would love to have this conversation and take it further. So that's it from me. I would like to hand you back to Trent, and he'll take you through actual practicalities of the demo of how journey management works. Thank you.
Thanks, Desan. We started off this afternoon by giving a high-level view of the space of customer experience management and journey management, and then Desan took you through some of the practical detail and the application of the techniques that we use within the financial services industry. And what I want to do is I'm going to spend the last part of our webinar this afternoon talking about how this actually manifests in the inQuba product. So here we have a view of the inQuba platform. As mentioned earlier, the environment that we're going to be working in is that of Transatlantic, which is a short-term insurer. And we can see over here that Transatlantic has made use of the inQuba platform. And the starting point really is to represent an ideal journey, which then provides an anchoring mechanism for understanding the end-to-end customer journey. So at the high level, we've got the brand, then we've got the journey satisfaction in terms of its elements, and other elements of the customer value proposition, so product, price, relationship. All of this is configurable per client. And then we can take the journey and we can break that down into purchasing, administering, claiming, renewing, research, complaining, etc. And each of those in turn can be broken down. So within the claiming environment, we can go into lodgement and claims inquiry and assessment. So let's take a look at some of the detail over here. For instance, we drill into the claims area, we'll see the quality attributes that we're measuring: overall satisfaction, customer effort, resolution time. We can go into lodgement, and we can see the quality attributes associated with that. And we can also then start to set responsibilities. So let's take a particular area, such as claiming. And then what we want to do is we actually want to associate text analytics with that. We've integrated that all into a single platform. And we can see that we've assigned the queries of assess and claim and communication all to that particular node and link that within the environment. So that's something fairly unique, not something that you typically see in platforms of this nature. What we can also do is, if we want to collect more quantitative data associated with the claims node, you can actually manage the set of questions that are going to be asked. And again, we've integrated all of that within a single platform, and we can specify exactly what the questions are that we're going to be asking for that particular area. In this particular case, we're looking at some open-ended claims feedback. So that really positions the setup of the model. All of the data we collect is then associated with the customer experience model, and then we use this information to actually put a measurement framework together. So let's switch modes and actually switch into an end user view. And here we have transatlantic, and we have the customer experience manager coming into work. And the customer experience manager, for instance, can get a high-level view on a year-to-date basis on terms of the NPS, customer satisfaction, certain operational metrics like new business and cancellations. And what we can also do is we can actually zoom into a particular part of the model. So in this particular case, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the period from March through to June. And then further, we actually take the customer journey. Now, this is a different representation of the journey that we saw earlier. So we can look at purchasing, administering, claiming, and complaining. And the claiming area, in turn, we're going to look at a little bit more detail, goes through lodgement, assessment, claims, inquiry, etc. So we can see over here that our claims area is tracking below, for instance, purchasing, which obviously would be a concern for the customer experience manager. So let's go and have a look at, for instance, assessment, which is doing particularly badly. And we can see that there are three themes that have been spoken about: the assessor, communication, and the repair shop. So for interest rate, let's go and have a look at communication. Now, one of the key elements of the inQuba platform is that we link all of the underlying data to the customer experience model. And you can start to see how we've brought together both structured information. So here we have a post that's been put on Facebook, through to that's unstructured information, through to structured information. We can actually look at the survey details of Charlotte that we've been servicing over a period of time. And we can see all of the feedback that Charlotte has provided, regardless of the channel that we collect from the information from. And we can also see the context of the customer through what we call the event information, which is shown on the right-hand side. And you also see that we finish off over here with a question that was the one we drilled in a little bit earlier in terms of why don't you get back to me, and that's been associated with communication. So looking at this and seeing the fact that this individual, Charlotte, has given us a 1 out of 10 for our Net Promoter Score would obviously be a point of concern. So let's have a look at a little bit more of the context of Charlotte. And what we can do is we can actually go directly into our single view. So here's a summary view of Charlotte in terms of her contact details. We see that she's had 14 interactions with the platform, and there's 84 different transactions that have taken place across the entire business. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to drill into some of the details and start having a look at the context of Charlotte. And lots of things going on here. First of all, we've got actually different representation of Charlotte, and we link to those together. And then we have one integrated view of Charlotte over a period of time. We can then go and have a look at a text view of Charlotte, and we can go and see what Charlotte is saying, but not only what Charlotte is saying, but actually linking those different comments that we have to different parts of the customer experience model. So this is a customer experience model for one person. For instance, we can see some comments over here associated with the overall brand. Our point of interest is, for instance, the claims environment, and you can see that there's different comments that are going on there, and you can see that those she's talking about claims and timeliness within that particular environment as well. What we can also see is that potentially this customer is at risk. She said that your organization lacks professionalism, and we can actually use that as a rule to escalate that particular issue into an irresponsible party. So let's go and have a look at the interactions that we've had with Charlotte. So we've sent some assessments out, we've received some emails, we've had some Twitter comments that have come through, and all of that's available, and obviously you can always drill into the underlying detail as well. But what we want to focus on today, in fact, are all of the different transactions that have taken place, and these have been linked to Charlotte. So we can see that, for instance, there's some claims, we can see some emails that have come in, we can see some interactions in the online channel and the call center. And those are the transactions that we've been receiving and have mapped to Charlotte to actually understand her customer journey. So let me show you how we actually do that. And really where it starts off is by defining our transaction flow. So what we need to do within the inQuba platform is we need to tell the platform what are the different transactions that potentially this individual is going to have. And here, for instance, we have one associated with activations on the web. And this allows us to map the external data attributes that Desan spoke about into the actual platform. This becomes a particular transaction, which is represented in the platform and then managed through our integration wizard. Now, once we have all of that information, we collected the information, we actually assimilated all of it together, and that really allows us to get to the point of starting to represent a customer journey. So we're using all of that data to actually pull it together, and what we can actually then do is we can show an aggregate of all customer journeys. And each of these paths over here, for instance, to the top left, we go from application agent to receive a quote from the agent. The next one is from application agent to accept quote. And we can see the different paths that customers are taking, including some loops that are happening. Now, this certainly is very valuable, and it's great to see the end-to-end customer path. But probably what's even more valuable is the ability to actually use this information to have triggers of communication. And we can do exactly that within the inQuba platform. So I've gone into the mode of selecting a path. So I'm going to select a particular path over here. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a rule set associated with this particular customer interacting with the platform. So we can see we've selected a path over here of receive quote from the agent, accept agent, and activate web. Now, there's a variety of different rules that you can create off the back of that. And what I'm going to show you is how we create what we call a target audience rule. So basically what this says is either select all of the customers that have been through the path that I've just highlighted. So in other words, any customers that went through that path in the past, or alternatively, should a customer go through that path in the future, create a trigger rule. And we can give that a name. So let's call this just our demo customer path. And we can set a time period that we want to have a look at. Let's set that for instance, for 7 weeks, and we can save that into the environment. So what we've done there is we've actually then saved that into the environment. Once that rule is in place, we can start to actually use that rule. And I'm going to move on to the ability to use this information for an engagement. So you recall from our introduction that Charlotte had been through a process of getting up and running, that she'd had a great experience. And really what we want to do now is we're going to use the opportunity where Charlotte has been through that great experience to actually send her a communication that is very specific to her, that allows her to get the benefit of an upsell or cross-sell that makes sense for her particular context. So what we're going to do is we're going to drill into a particular campaign, and we've actually prepared one here in advance. I'm just going to go into the detail of that, and we're going to sell some a gap cover solution for Charlotte. So we start off by defining who we're going to target. So we want people that have applied by the call center. So that's our one rule that we're going to be using. And the second rule is obviously people that have actually come in from the website. And yeah, you can see one of those rules. So application agent to receive quote to activate web and the 60 days. Now, what we want to do is we're going to add another element to this, and we're actually going to choose someone that in fact has a positive net promoter score. So I'm going to quickly add an additional rule. We call that an answer to a particular question, and those people, obviously we're looking for people that are promoters. So let's go into the particular communications that we've pre-configured and that we've been using to actually collect the insights. And we're going to choose the people that have actually taken up the survey. We're going into the web environment, and we're going to go into the purchase survey. And the question we want to have a look at is the Net Promoter Score. And here, what we can do is we can select those people that are promoters. So that all of that's done directly within the platform. So that shows you how the rules work. And then we're really moving on to the setup of the actual message itself. And we can personalize and brand it very specifically to the environment. And ultimately, what we can then do is we can actually preview what the communication is going to look like. Just showing you very quickly. Matthias, for instance, is going to get a particular communication. And then what we can do is we can actually drill into the dialogue, and it's giving you all of the context of the gap insurance, and then getting feedback as to whether the person is interested in this particular value proposition or not. Important to note that the rendering is specific to the particular device. So obviously it will render quite differently for the web environment versus the cell phone environment, and that is very much device specific. So with that, it really concludes what I wanted to run through today. I know we're running a little bit tight on time, but I'm going to hand back to Anthony, and we use the very limited time that we've got left to just finish off with any questions that we might have.
Hi everyone, this is Anthony here. I'm the admin on the webinar, and I've just been marshalling some of the questions. So I've got a great question here. I've got a few, and if for the panelists, if you want to unmute, if you think you've got a good answer for this. So here's one: customer experience and journey management. Are they interchangeable, or are they the same thing?
So I don't think it's one or the other. I think that journey management is I believe that journey management is the evolution of customer experience, and customer experience really encapsulates a number of things, and it's really about the customer experience is about the customer journey. So I don't see them as separate at all. I see journey management as the evolution of customer experience.
Great. I think, is there something you wanted to add, Trent?
Yeah, I think, we've been limited in the past by associating customer experience management with surveys, mainly because the technologies haven't evolved to allow us to see beyond feedback we got from surveys. I think with the advent of end-to-end customer journey management, we now have the ability to have a far broader lens, and in many respects we see customer experience management is almost a subset of end-to-end journey management. And as Desan mentioned, surveys are sample oriented. They only give a subset view of your customer base, whereas journey management gives you a more comprehensive overview of all of your customers. But obviously you get the richness of how customers are feeling from either structured or unstructured feedback.
So if I could just add on to that, so I fully agree with both the answers from Margot and Trent. I think just to add on to it is what I see customer journey management is the real power of it is talking to a customer in real time and engaging with a customer while they are going through that process in achieving that goal, while they're actually going through those journeys. What I see in traditional or classical type of customer experience management programs is we deal with laggard information. So it might be a bit too late to communicate with a client when they've already had a few challenges or issues in a journey. So the power for me is real-time engagements.
Thank you very much for those people that joined us today. We will be in contact as a follow-up. As mentioned, there's a white paper available. And have a great evening. Thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.